You have been in a conversation with someone, and halfway through, you realize something. You are completely here, not half present, while another part of your brain monitors something else. Not performing interest while actually waiting for your turn to speak. Not watching the clock or scanning the room or wondering when this will naturally end. Completely here, genuinely interested in what this person is saying. Feeling heard in a way that is rare, leaving the conversation with more energy than you had going in. And there is a specific quality to how that person made you feel. Not that they were impressive, not that they said brilliant things, not that they dominated the conversation or told the best stories, or had the most interesting life. They made you feel interesting. They made you feel like what you were saying mattered, like the version of yourself that showed up in that conversation was somehow more alive than the version that usually shows up, like you wanted to keep talking, not because they were so fascinating, but because around them you became more fascinating. You have been on the other side of that too. The conversation where you felt genuinely seen, where your words were received rather than tolerated, where the connection was real rather than performed. And you probably walked away thinking something. I want more of that person in my life. That experience, the specific quality of a conversation that leaves you feeling more alive, is not random. It is not personality. It is not charisma in the way most people define it. It is not a gift that some people have and others do not. It is a set of skills. Specific, learnable, practicable skills built on a very clear understanding of what people actually need from a conversation, and almost nobody is teaching them honestly. That is what this is about. Here is the first thing you need to understand. And this reframes everything that follows. People do not remember what you said in a conversation. They remember how you made them feel. This is not a quote. It is a neurological fact. The brain does not store conversations the way a recorder stores audio. It stores emotional experiences. The feeling tone of an interaction. The sense of whether being in that conversation expanded or contracted. The gut-level impression of whether this person sees me or does not. And the impression happens fast, faster than conscious thought, faster than the words being exchanged. In the first moments of an interaction, before a single meaningful sentence has been completed, the emotional system has already begun running its assessment. Is this person for me or against me? Is this a safe place to be myself, or do I need to manage how I am coming across? Is this someone who will add to me or take from me? Those questions run automatically. They are answered not by content, but by cues, tone, eye contact, body language, the quality of attention, the specific feeling of whether this person is actually here with me or somewhere else. The people who make others love talking to them have mastered the answer to those questions before the conversation is 3 sentences old. Not through technique, through a genuine orientation toward the other person that the other person's nervous system can feel. But here is what you are missing about why most people are not magnetic in conversation. It is not that they are boring. It is not that they have nothing interesting to say. It is not that they lack social skills in any obvious way. It is that they are in the conversation solving the wrong problem. Most people enter a conversation managing an experience for themselves, managing how they come across, managing whether they are being liked, managing what to say next, managing the impression they are creating, managing the anxiety of being in social proximity with another human being who is forming an opinion of them. All of that management is happening inside their own head, while they are supposedly having a conversation with another person, and the other person, even without being able to name it, can feel the split attention, the slight sense that this person is not quite with me, the quality of being talked at rather than talked with, the absence of genuine curiosity. The conversation happens, but the connection does not. Because connection requires both people to actually be there, and one person was somewhere else. In the internal management system, solving a problem that had nothing to do with the person standing in front of them. The shift from managing your experience to attending to theirs is the most significant change available in any conversation, and it is not a skill. It is a decision. Here is what real attention feels like to receive, and why it is so rare. Think about the last time someone gave you their complete, genuine, undivided attention in a conversation, not polite attention, not nodding while forming a response attention, real attention, where you could feel that they were actually tracking what you were saying, actually interested in where the sentence was going, actually with you in the experience rather than beside you while being elsewhere. If you are struggling to think of when that last happened, you are not unusual. Genuine attention is rare, not because people are unkind, because genuine attention is harder than it looks. It requires setting aside the internal management, the self-monitoring, the planning of what to say next, the evaluation of how you are being perceived. It requires being willing to not know what you are going to say until it is time to say it, because you were too busy actually listening to have prepared anything. Most people cannot do this for more than a few seconds before the internal management starts again. But the people who can, who have practiced this enough that genuine presence is their default rather than an effort, produce a specific effect in the people they talk to. The other person feels found, not evaluated, not assessed, not approved of or judged or analyzed. Found, as in, this person sees me. This person is interested in what I'm actually saying rather than in using my words as a launch pad for their own. This person is here with me. And that feeling, rare as it is deeply compelling. People want to stay near it, want to return to it, want to bring their real selves to conversations with someone who makes them feel that way. That is the foundation of being someone people love to talk to. Not performance, not clever words, genuine presence. Now here is where it gets specific, because presence is the foundation, but it is not the whole building. The people who are truly magnetic in conversation do specific things, not tricks, not techniques dressed up as authenticity, genuine orientations and habits that produce the experience of being heard. The first is asking better questions, not more questions, better ones. Here is the difference. Most questions in conversation are surface questions. Where are you from? What do you do? How long have you been doing that? These questions gather information. They do not open anything. They do not invite the other person into the conversation in a way that feels genuinely interesting to them. They fill silence with the activity of question and answer. Better questions do something different. They invite the other person to go somewhere they did not expect to go. They create a small surprise. They open a door to a part of the person's experience that does not usually get accessed in small talk. What is the best part of what you do? What surprised you most about living there? What made you decide to go in that direction? These questions are not dramatically different in content, but they are completely different in what they invite. They invite reflection. They invite the other person to access something real rather than recite something rehearsed. They say implicitly, I am interested in your actual experience, not just the factual surface of your life. And people respond to that invitation, because most people spend most conversations on the factual surface of their life, reciting the rehearsed version, the version calibrated for quick social exchange. And when someone asks something that invites them beneath that surface, there is a quality of relief. Finally, a real conversation. And the person who created that relief is immediately someone they want to keep talking to. Here is where it gets uncomfortable, because this is the piece most people do not want to look at. Most people are not actually listening in conversations. They are waiting. waiting for the pause in the other person's speaking that signals it is their turn, using the time while the other person is talking to prepare what they are about to say, filtering what the other person is saying through the question of how it connects to what they want to say next. Listening to respond, not listening to understand. And the other person can feel it, not always consciously, but in a diffuse background kind of way. The sense that their words are landing but not being received, that the conversation is happening but not the connection. Listening to understand is a different act entirely. It requires genuine curiosity about where the other person's thinking is going. The willingness to not know what you are going to say until they are done. The ability to follow their thread wherever it leads rather than redirecting to your own. This is not passive. Real listening is an active pursuit, the pursuit of understanding another person's actual experience, not the version of their experience that connects to yours, not the part that gives you an opening for your story, the actual, specific, unique version of what this person is going through, and the person being listened to that way, being genuinely followed rather than tolerated until the turn changes, feels something specific. They feel interesting, not because they said something profound, because someone was genuinely interested. And feeling interesting in a world where most people feel invisible in conversation is one of the most powerful experiences available. Here is the midpoint shift that changes everything. Most people think magnetic conversationalists are fascinating. They are not. They are interested. That is the distinction most people never make. The person everyone wants to talk to is not the one with the most impressive life, not the one with the best stories, not the one who knows the most or has done the most or has been to the most places. It is the one who is genuinely, actively, visibly interested in the person in front of them. Here is why this matters so much. People are the most interesting subject in the world to themselves. Every person is living an inner life of enormous complexity, a history of experiences that shaped them, a current set of joys and struggles and questions that nobody fully knows, opinions they have never said out loud, dreams they have not named, fears they manage every day, a version of themselves they are trying to become. All of that is in there, in every person, in every conversation. And it almost never gets accessed. Because most conversations stay on the surface, because most people are too busy managing their own experience to be genuinely curious about someone else's. The person who is genuinely curious about all of that, who asks the question that opens the door to the inner life rather than staying on the surface of the external facts, becomes instantly rare, instantly memorable, instantly someone the other person wants more access to, not because of who they are, because of what they bring out. Let us talk about something specific that separates the people who are loved in conversation from the people who are merely tolerated. The ability to make someone feel good about themselves, not through flattery, not through compliments, through something more specific and more powerful, through noticing. Most people move through interactions without genuinely noticing the person in front of them. They see the surface version, the role, the function, the social presentation. The person who notices differently, who sees specific things about a specific person and names them, produces an effect that is almost impossible to manufacture. Not, "You look great today." That is a compliment. It lands and moves on. Something more specific. The way you explained that was really clear. That is a genuinely interesting way to look at it. I have been thinking about what you said last week. The question you asked earlier changed how I was thinking about it. These are noticing statements. They say, I was paying enough attention to see something specific about you. Not the general you, not the role you play. You, and being specifically seen. genuinely noticed in a world that mostly looks at the surface, is one of the most powerful feelings available in human interaction. People return to the people who make them feel specifically seen, not because those people said nice things, because those people were paying attention in a way that is rare. Here is something about storytelling and conversation that most people misunderstand. Everyone thinks being a good conversationalist means being a good storyteller. It does not. Or rather, it does, but not in the way most people think. The problem with stories and conversation is not the quality of the story. It is the function the story is serving. Most people tell stories to demonstrate something about themselves, to signal their experience, to establish their competence, or their suffering, or their humor, or their connection to something interesting. That kind of storytelling takes up space. It uses the conversation as a platform rather than a connection, and the person listening can feel that too. The subtle sense of being an audience rather than a participant. The sense that the conversation has a star and they are not it. The storytelling that builds connection serves a different function. It creates openings rather than filling them. The story that ends with a genuine question about whether the other person has experienced something similar. The vulnerability that invites reciprocal vulnerability rather than performing it for effect. The self-disclosure that is specific enough to be real but brief enough to leave room. The ratio matters enormously. In a conversation, the person who talks 70% and listens 30% feels like they were in a one-sided conversation. The person who talks 30% and listens 70% feels like they met someone who was genuinely interested in them. Interestingly, they also tend to say that the person who was listening 70% was the more interesting one in the conversation. Not because that person said more, because that person made the other person feel more interesting. And feeling interesting is what gets attributed to the person who created the feeling. Let us talk about the specific texture of a great conversation, because understanding what makes a conversation feel great is different from knowing what makes you seem impressive in one. A great conversation has a quality of movement. It goes somewhere. Not necessarily somewhere logical, but somewhere real. It starts in one place and ends somewhere neither person expected. It follows genuine curiosity wherever it leads rather than staying on the scripted surface. It allows for tangents and detours and the specific kind of digression that only happens when both people are actually present. And that movement, that sense of going somewhere together, is what creates the felt experience of connection. The conversation that stays on the surface, that covers the standard topics in the standard order, does not produce this. It produces politeness. It produces the experience of having been in a social exchange, not the experience of having been in a genuine encounter with another person. The people who create this quality of movement in conversation share a specific trait. They are not afraid of the unexpected turn. They are not trying to control where the conversation goes. They follow the thread wherever it leads with genuine interest, even if the thread takes them somewhere they did not plan to go. And the other person, feeling the freedom of that, the sense that nothing is off limits, that they will be followed wherever they choose to go, relaxes in a specific way. The conversation guard goes down, and what comes out when the guard goes down is the real person, the real opinions, the real feelings, the real version of what they think about something rather than the rehearsed appropriate version. That real version is the person others connect to, not the curated surface. The person who creates the conditions for that to emerge is never forgotten. Here is the thing about vulnerability in conversation, because this is the ingredient most people are most afraid of and most in need of. Genuine connection requires genuine exposure. Not dramatic exposure, not confessional disclosure of everything private, but something real, the admission that you are uncertain about something, the honest expression of actually finding something difficult, the willingness to say something true about your own experience rather than the version calibrated for how it will be received. Most conversations are performances, everyone presenting the version of themselves most likely to be accepted, the version that is competent, interesting, unbothered, put together, the version that does not need anything and is not struggling with anything and has everything reasonably sorted. And the conversation, built entirely from performed surfaces, never quite reaches the place where connection actually lives. Connection lives in the honest moment. The moment when one person says something true and the other person thinks, "I feel that too." Those moments are the ones that make someone walk away from a conversation saying, "I feel like I actually know this person," not because they learned facts about them, because they glimpsed something real. The person who creates those moments, who is willing to go first with a small piece of genuine reality, gives the other person permission to do the same. And the conversation that becomes real, even briefly, even in one small honest exchange, is the kind that people want to return to. Now let us talk about something that nobody discusses directly, the energy you bring into a conversation before you open your mouth, because it matters more than almost anything you say. Here is what this means. Your internal state in the moments before a conversation sets the entire quality of what follows. If you walk into a conversation anxious about how you are coming across, the other person will feel the anxiety, not as information about you, as a low-level tension in the interaction that makes them slightly guarded, slightly less relaxed, slightly less willing to be fully present. If you walk into a conversation genuinely curious about the other person, that curiosity is palpable, not just in the questions you ask, in the quality of attention you bring, in the way you receive what they say, in the sense they get that being in this conversation with you is a pleasure rather than a performance. The internal state is not invisible. It is the most legible thing about you in an interaction, which means the most important work you can do to become someone people love to talk to is internal. Not building better questions, not practicing clever comebacks, not learning conversational techniques, shifting the orientation from "how am I coming across" to "who is this person and what is actually going on with them." That shift, made before the conversation starts, changes everything about how the conversation feels, for both of you. Here is something specific about difficult conversations, because the ability to navigate them well is one of the clearest separators between people who are genuinely magnetic and people who are merely likable in easy conditions. Anyone can be pleasant when the conversation is light. The person who can be fully present in a hard conversation, who does not flinch from difficulty, who does not rush to resolve the discomfort before it has been allowed to be real, is genuinely rare, and rare things are valued. Here is what being present in a hard conversation actually looks like. It looks like not immediately trying to fix it. The instinct when someone brings something difficult is to fix it, to offer solutions, to reframe it towards something more manageable, to provide the perspective that makes the hard thing less hard, and sometimes that is what is needed. But most of the time it is not what is needed first. What is needed first is acknowledgement. The specific, honest acknowledgement that what the person is carrying is real, that the difficulty is genuine, that the pain or the confusion or the frustration is valid. Not, "Here is how to think about it differently." Not, "Have you tried doing this?" Not, "The same thing happened to me and here is how I handled it." Just, "That sounds genuinely hard," or "I can understand why that is difficult." Or even just the quality of attention that says, "I am fully here with you in this and I am not rushing you through it." That quality, the willingness to sit with someone in the difficulty rather than problem-solving them out of it, is one of the most connecting things available in conversation, because it is rare, and because it is the thing most people are actually looking for when they bring something difficult to someone else, not the solution, the company. Here is something about humor in conversation, because this is where a lot of people think the magic happens, and it does, sometimes, but not in the way most people pursue it. Most people who try to be funny in conversation are trying to be impressive. They're performing wit, timing the punchline, waiting for the reaction, using humor to establish a version of themselves. That kind of humor can be entertaining, but it does not build connection. It builds an audience. The humor that actually builds connection is different. It is the humor that comes from genuine shared observation, from noticing something together, from the specific delight of being in the same moment at the same time with another person and finding the same thing funny. Not staged, not prepared, just genuinely alive to what is funny about the specific situation you're both in. That kind of laughter, the spontaneous shared kind, is one of the fastest routes to genuine connection available, because laughter is involuntary. When two people laughed genuinely at the same moment, something real just happened between them, not a performance, a real shared experience. And people want to return to the people who have made them laugh in that specific way, not because the person was hilarious, because the person was present enough to notice the same things they noticed, which means they were actually there. And actually being there is the rarest and most valuable thing in any conversation. Let us talk about the role of memory in conversation, because this is one of the most underrated tools available. Remembering specific things about people, not in a database collecting way, in the genuine way that happens when you are actually paying attention to someone. When you remember what someone told you last time, when you bring it up the next time you see them, when you ask a follow-up question about the thing they mentioned 3 weeks ago, something specific happens. The other person feels held, not just remembered, held. The specific feeling that they exist in your awareness when they are not in front of you. That they left an impression that mattered enough to stay, that they are not interchangeable with other people in your life. This is not about impressing someone with a good memory. It is about the message that specific memory sends. The message says, "You mattered enough to me that I kept something you said." And that message, received, produces a response that most people underestimate. It makes the person want to matter to you more. It makes them more open, more invested in the conversation, more willing to bring the real version of themselves, because the real version is clearly the one you are paying attention to. The most connected people are not always the most interesting. They are the ones who make the people around them feel most remembered. Here is what most people get wrong about the ending of a conversation. They let it trail off. The conversation runs its natural course. The energy starts to thin. Someone glances at their phone or toward the door, and the ending becomes a series of increasingly vague gestures toward departure. Fine. Yeah. Okay. Well, good to see you. Yeah. Take care. The ending becomes a bureaucratic process of mutual disengagement, and the person walks away from the conversation with a vague feeling that whatever quality was in it has now dissipated. The ending of a conversation is the last thing the other person carries with them. It is what sets the emotional memory of the interaction, and the people who are loved in conversation understand this. They end things specifically, something I am going to keep thinking about from this conversation. I really liked what you said about that. That was genuinely one of the more interesting conversations I have had in a while. Not flattery, specificity, the specific thing they will carry from this specific conversation with this specific person. And the other person, receiving that, walks away with something real, not a vague, pleasant feeling, a specific memory, something you said that stayed with me. And they will think about you between now and the next time they see you, which means the next time they see you, they are already looking forward to it. Here is the thing about people who are genuinely magnetic in conversation over a long time. Not just in one interaction, not just when they are at their best. Over time, in all conditions, with all kinds of people, they have built something, not a skill set, a genuine orientation toward people, a default curiosity about human beings, a sincere interest in what people are actually experiencing rather than what they are presenting, a comfort with depth that allows other people to go deep, a willingness to be real that gives other people permission to be real, a way of being present that makes the person they are with feel like the most important person in the room. Not because of technique, because that is genuinely how they approach people, and here is the uncomfortable truth. That orientation is not built from wanting to be liked. People who are trying to be liked are self-focused. Their attention is on themselves, on how they are coming across, on whether the impression is working. And that self-focus, however well disguised, is the thing that prevents the genuine presence that makes connection possible. The orientation is built from genuine interest in people. The decision, made consistently, to be curious about the person in front of you, rather than worried about how you appear to them. That decision, practiced until it becomes a habit, practiced until it becomes a default, is the change that makes everything else possible. Not the questions, not the listening techniques, not the storytelling or the humor or the specific things, the decision to actually be here with this person, in this moment, because this person is worth being fully here for. Here is where we leave this, not with a list of things to practice, with a truth that makes practicing anything worth doing. The reason people love talking to certain people is not mysterious. It is not magic. It is not an innate quality that cannot be developed. It is the felt experience of being genuinely seen, of having someone's actual attention, of feeling that what you are saying is landing rather than just filling the space between their statements, of being in a conversation that goes somewhere real rather than covering the required social surface, of being with someone who is actually here. And that experience, for most people, is so rare that when they encounter it, they want to return to it. They seek it out. They bring their best selves to it. They think about the person who creates it long after the conversation is over. That is what you are building toward. Not being impressive, not being fascinating, not having the best stories or the sharpest wit or the most interesting life. Being genuinely present, genuinely curious, genuinely interested in the specific human being who is standing in front of you right now. That is the whole thing. Simple in concept, rare in practice, completely learnable, not by adding techniques onto an unchanged internal orientation, by changing the orientation itself, by deciding in every conversation that the person you are talking to is worth your actual presence, your actual attention, your actual curiosity about who they are and what is actually happening with them. That decision, made enough times, becomes automatic, and the person who makes it automatically becomes someone other people love to talk to, not because of what they say, because of what they make other people feel when they are saying it. Present, heard, interesting, seen. That is the gift, and it is available to anyone willing to give it.